Everyone knows Sean Diddy Combs is currently sitting in a federal detention center in Brooklyn, facing charges that could lock him away for the rest of his life. That is the headline you see everywhere. But the headline you are missing, and the reality that is much darker than just one celebrity fall from grace, is that this was never just about one man behaving badly. You do not run a criminal enterprise for 3 decades without help. The common belief is that Diddy was a powerful mogul who used his influence to silence victims through fear. While that is true, it is only half the story. The superior reality, backed by the federal indictment unsealed in the Southern District of New York, suggests that this was a coordinated machine involving staff, financial fixers, and a massive network of enablers who made the abuse a line item on a budget. We are going to answer 3 massive questions that the mainstream news is glossing over. First, how exactly did the settlement with Cassie trigger a domino effect that no amount of money could stop? Second, and most shockingly, what specific evidence did the Fed seize that turned this from a sexual assault case into a full-blown racketeering indictment? And third, who were the unnamed co-conspirators listed in the documents who helped facilitate the infamous freak-offs? We have pulled the indictment, the bail hearing transcripts, and the timeline of events to show you the blueprint of how this empire operated. Let's start with the catalyst that brought the whole house of cards down. To understand why Diddy is in jail today, you have to look at November 16, 2023. This is the date Cassie filed her bombshell lawsuit. For years, there were whispers and rumors, but this filing was different. It contained specific dates, specific locations, and horrific details of abuse. Now, in the entertainment industry, lawsuits happen all the time. Usually, they drag on for months or years. Lawyers fight over discovery, they file motions to dismiss, and they play the waiting game. That is the standard expectation. The reality here was a shock to everyone watching. One day later, on November 17, 2023, the suit was settled. Think about that for a second. A lawsuit alleging years of trafficking and abuse was filed, and 24 hours later, it was resolved. According to a statement released by Diddy's lawyer at the time, the decision to settle was in no way an admission of wrongdoing. However, legal experts speaking to outlets like Variety and The Hollywood Reporter immediately flagged this speed as unprecedented. You do not pay out what was rumored to be 8 figures in 24 hours unless the plaintiff has something you absolutely cannot allow a jury to see. We found out exactly what that leverage was months later when CNN released the surveillance footage from the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles from 2016. The video showed exactly what Cassie's lawsuit described. It showed Diddy assaulting her in the hallway. The existence of this tape changes the entire narrative of the settlement. It suggests that Diddy knew exactly what evidence existed and was willing to pay any price to bury it. But here's the payout for this section. The settlement backfired. By settling so quickly, it didn't make the problem go away. Instead, it put blood in the water. It signaled to every other potential victim and witness that the wall of silence had cracked. It signaled that Diddy was vulnerable. And most importantly, it gave federal investigators the roadmap they needed. The civil suit laid out the pattern, and the settlement speed confirmed the desperation. That was the moment the investigation shifted from a possibility to an inevitability. Now we need to get into the most disturbing and shocking part of the government's case against Diddy. This is the information that justifies the RICO charges, which are typically used for mob bosses and drug cartels. The indictment unsealed on September 17, 2024, describes the freak-offs. These were not just parties. According to the federal prosecutors, these were elaborate, coarse sex performances that Diddy arranged, directed, and recorded. The details in the indictment are stomach-churning, but we need to focus on the logistics because that is what proves the enterprise aspect of the charges. The government alleges that Diddy and his associates used force, threats, and coercion to cause victims to engage in these acts with commercial sex workers. These events would reportedly last for days at a time. This brings us to the most viral detail from the indictment, but we need to look at it through a legal lens. Federal agents seized various supplies from Diddy's homes in Miami and Los Angeles during the raids in March 2024. Among the items seized were narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. The internet made a lot of jokes about this number, but in a court of law, that volume of supplies is evidence of a massive organized operation. You do not buy 1,000 bottles of anything for personal use. That is inventory. That creates a supply chain. That requires storage and distribution. It proves intent and scale. But the oil isn't the most damaging evidence. The most damaging evidence is the recordings. The indictment alleges that Diddy filmed these freak-offs, often without the victim's knowledge or consent. Prosecutors argued in court that these recordings were used as collateral. If a victim tried to leave or speak out, the threat of releasing these embarrassing or compromising videos was used to keep them silent. This is what created the culture of fear. It wasn't just physical violence, it was psychological warfare backed by digital blackmail. The prosecution claims they have dozens of these videos. This is the mutually assured destruction we talked about earlier. Diddy allegedly kept these tapes to ensure no one could ever cross him, but now those same tapes are the primary evidence against him. We also have to talk about the physical toll these events took. The indictment states that Diddy and the victims would receive IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use after these multi-day sessions. Think about the level of coordination required for that. You need medical personnel, or at least someone trained to administer IVs. You need a steady supply of fluids. This wasn't a chaotic party. It was a managed event with a recovery protocol. This level of detail is why the feds are confident. They aren't just relying on witness testimony, which can be attacked by defense lawyers. They have the physical receipts, the supply logs, and the video files. The freak-offs were the core product of this alleged criminal enterprise, and the documentation of them is what is keeping Diddy behind bars right now. This leads us directly to the third massive question: who helped him? A strictly solo operation cannot manage 1,000 bottles of oil, book travel for sex workers across state lines, and arrange IV drips. The indictment explicitly refers to members and associates of the Combs enterprise. This is where the story gets even bigger than Diddy. The government claims that Diddy relied on his employees, including security staff, household staff, and high-ranking supervisors to facilitate his crimes. These people allegedly helped arrange travel, booked hotel rooms, stocked the supplies, and even cleaned up the hotel rooms to conceal the damage caused during these events. The indictment mentions that these associates also helped maintain control over the victims. They monitored their movements, tracked their location, and sometimes even enforced the isolation that Diddy demanded. This is crucial because it spreads the liability. If you are an assistant who booked a flight for a sex worker knowing what the purpose of the trip was, you are potentially liable. If you are a security guard who stopped a victim from leaving a hotel room, you are potentially part of the conspiracy. This is the classic RICO strategy. Prosecutors pressure the lower-level employees to flip on the boss. We're already seeing this strategy play out. The bail hearing revealed that prosecutors have contacted numerous witnesses. The defense team offered a massive bail package, $50 million, backed by Diddy's Miami home and his mother's home. They offered to hire a private security firm to monitor him 24 hours a day. They offered to limit his phone access, and yet the judge said no. Why? Because of the obstruction of justice charges. Prosecutors presented evidence that Diddy had tried to contact witnesses and influence their testimony even while the investigation was ongoing. They claimed he used other people's phones and third-party messaging apps to reach out. This behavior terrified the court. It showed that even with the spotlight on him, he was still trying to pull the strings of his network. The rejection of bail is a massive signal. In the federal system, detention rates are high, but for someone with Diddy's resources to be denied bail twice suggests the evidence regarding witness tampering is overwhelming. The judge essentially ruled that no condition of release could guarantee the safety of the community or the integrity of the trial. The court is saying that Diddy's influence is so pervasive and his network of enablers so loyal or fearful that he cannot be trusted to sit at home. We also need to look at the financial trail. The indictment mentions cash payments. Moving large amounts of cash to pay sex workers requires a mechanism. It requires bank withdrawals that are structured to avoid detection, or it requires a business that deals in cash. This is where the forensic accountants come in. They are likely combing through the ledgers of Bad Boy Entertainment and Diddy's other ventures to see how these expenses were categorized. Were they written off as production costs? Were they labeled as consulting fees? If the government can prove that business funds were used to facilitate these crimes, it puts the entire business empire at risk of forfeiture. We also have the comparison to other high-profile cases that gives us a glimpse of the future. Legal analysts are drawing direct lines between this case and the R. Kelly case. In both instances, you have a wealthy music figure accused of using his entourage to procure and control victims. R. Kelly was sentenced to decades in prison. The difference here is the scale of Diddy's wealth and the corporate connections. Diddy wasn't just an artist. He was a brand partner with major corporations. As this trial moves forward, we have to ask, what did these corporate partners know? When settlements were paid out in the past, who signed the checks?
The timeline going forward is going to be slow and brutal. The discovery process involves terabytes of data. The defense will try to suppress the video evidence, arguing it was obtained illegally or is irrelevant. They will try to attack the credibility of the witnesses. But the freak-off tapes are the wild card. If those tapes are admitted into evidence, it is very difficult to see a path to acquittal. The visual proof of the crimes alleged in the indictment creates a hurdle that high-priced lawyers rarely overcome. So where does this leave us?
The expectation was that Diddy was invincible, a Teflon Don who could settle his way out of any problem. The reality is that his own need for control, his need to tape everything, his need to hoard supplies, his need to control every aspect of the people around him created the paper trail that led the FBI to his door. The system that protected him for 30 years has been dismantled. Piece by piece. The silence that he bought with settlements has been broken by federal subpoenas. This story is far from over. As more associates are pressured by the threat of their own prison time, we will likely see more names dropped. We will learn more about who stood by and watched and who actively participated. The industry secrets are spilling out, and the stain is going to spread far beyond just Sean Combs. If you found this deep dive into the legal and financial reality of the Diddy case helpful, you need to understand the full context of how industry fixers operate. We have an entire breakdown of the Hollywood Fixer Network in our Fresh Celebrity Tea playlist. It explains the mechanics of how stories like this get buried for decades before they finally explode. Click right here to watch that next, because once you see the playbook, you will never look at celebrity news the same way again.